So thank you very much for inviting me here today. I got the title from Sophie and was a little bit daunted about what you can say about a career in 20 minutes. Let me just start at the very beginning. I'm a nurse, and a nurse to my absolute core. I spent just shy of 30 years in the NHS, moving from nursing student through to senior nurse manager, and did my doctorate towards the end of my NHS career. And like you, I hit some stumbling blocks on where to go post-doc. And at that point, I moved to academia, and that was a few years ago now. And what I want to tell you is just some of the things I've learned about getting involved in research. I now work in a very teaching intensive university, but I have a number of colleagues who think they want to get involved in research. And one of the first questions that I always ask them is, why do you want to be research active? And I don't know if that's a question you ever ask yourselves. It's a fantastic way to go, but you do have to really want to do it, because it's not necessarily an easy path. So that's my starting point with the colleagues that I work with. And then I ask them to think about, what is it that really stops them from being research active? In my personal research, I do a lot of work about trying to get evidence into practice and using implementation science and those sort of approaches. And when we don't do something, we kind of attribute not doing it to something. And it may be any of these domains, it may be in any of these domains, but what we tend to do, knee-jerk reaction, when you were asked earlier what were the challenges to being involved in research, we tend to say time, but we know it's not necessarily time. That is always a problem, but it's not the only problem. It might be that we're a bit scared, we feel like imposters, we feel overwhelmed, we feel silly in front of really experienced researchers. Have a think about what actually makes it more difficult for you. This is too complicated to go into in great detail, but I have put a couple of references, because those of you who are interested, it's worth reading the papers. But once you know what's stopping you, then you can put in place clear strategies to help you move forward. So if, for example, you lack skills, you can use things like self-monitoring, rehearsal of relevant skills, try things out. So have a read of the paper, but that will help you start to think about some of the things you need to do to progress your knowledge and competence in research. You can use it for anything you want to do, but in this instance, research. The researcher development framework, I guess you're all very familiar with, are you? Does everyone use it? It's a really good way, an easy way of mapping where you are and what skills and knowledge you need to develop, and it's freely available online. So that's another way of sort of checking out where you are as a researcher and planning the way forward to be more skilled at it. So what I've learned, and this is very personal, but this is what I've learned on my journey as a researcher. So I moved into academia about 10 years ago and have gone from RA to Prof in that time. So I think one of the things that's really important is to know yourself and your own values and your own skills, what you know about what you're good at. Be really clear about that and stick with your own values. in your own expertise, and find like-minded people. And that takes quite a bit of work, but once you've found your plan, research becomes so much easier. I know you do a doctorate alone or with supervisors, but as soon as you move beyond that, you really need to be part of a decent research team. And I guess a lot of you will be very high level in clinical practice, and sometimes you have to just accept that you've got to move down a rung or two to get into a research team. That's okay, you can climb your way up again, but you're not on the same level because you won't have the same amount of expertise. For me, my clan, which I found quite early, was the UK Dermatology Clinical Trials Network, which is a group of dermatology people, and I went into skin health research, from across the UK, who are utterly dedicated to doing clinically relevant, high quality research. I got my first RA post and somebody suggested that I go for the UK DCTN Nursing Award. And I think there probably weren't very many applicants that year because I got it. And the support I've had from that group and the links I've made through it are unbelievable. So find what clan you belong to, because you do need people around you who are research active. And research people don't come looking for you when you want to get involved in research. You've got to be bold, be brave, go out there, make links. I was really impressed by what Raha was saying earlier about, bringing people into the fold, and be open to that and actually go and look for people like us who really want to work with other people. So know what you're good at and actively try and build your research profile. And then we mentioned earlier about trying to align your research and your clinical practice and whatever you're teaching, have it so it's all aligned, because it makes all your work purposeful and helps you really build your profile. Actively seek opportunities. So if you've done a doctorate, if you're doing a doctorate, or if you're postdoc, publish, really go for it. Publishing alone can be quite hard. So find people that you might like to work with, but make sure you share the workload and the attributions and all that sort of thing. But absolutely get out there and publish. Contact journal editors. They're desperate for reviewers, absolutely desperate for reviewers. And actually reading other people's work, particularly if you stick with reviewing papers in your own field, can actually be really helpful in looking at what other people are doing and moving your knowledge forward. Track what other people in your area are doing. If you know your research area, keep a good eye out and set up, there are lots of systems for setting up alerts so that you know what's going on in the field, because you've got to understand what research needs to be done. And you can get that from tracking those, but also from talking to people and doing patient and public involvement and engagement to understand what's important to lay people, to citizens. And our last speaker mentioned the James Lind Alliance, priority setting partnerships. Great way to go, so you really understand research questions that are important to be answered. Get yourself a research mentor. Most people are actually quite flattered to be asked to be a research mentor. So find somebody you admire, who you think might be able to guide you on your journey, and get a good mentor. Be brave and ask to join research teams. If you hear about some research that's going on, express your interest. And even very recently, I had a medical student from Leeds who was desperate to be involved in research and just couldn't get any traction where she was, and got in touch with me. She's really interested in skin health, and to support her medical student work, she was a carer in a nursing home. So she was a perfect fit for a study that I was doing on skin health in a nursing home. She did some work with us. She's got 2 publications out of it. She's about to present at a conference. She's going to fly. She will be on the pathway. So do just ask people. They can only say no. Ask to join supervisory teams, so start to supervise other people's PhDs. It's a great way to learn. Network. It does make some people feel quite gloomy, but actually those conversations can be really useful. I've just spoken to the RCN Foundation, and they're doing some work that's just so interesting to me, and you know, just those little conversations can be really helpful. Find the right funders, and I don't know if this might be sacrilegious, but there are funders other than the NIHR, and sometimes when you want to start off in a small way, actually the little funders can be really helpful. So I mean, I'm much more familiar with nursing than AHPs, but people like the Burdett Trust for Nursing are a great source of you know, reasonable pots of money if you really want to push forward with very nursing focused research. And of course the NIHR have got the lovely Nursing and Allied Health call out at the moment, RCN Foundation. There are lots of places you can get money, so think about that. And embrace serendipity. You know, the more you talk to people, the more you get out there, the more opportunities you'll get, and just go for them. But all the time, hold on to your core values and what's important to you. This is going to be ever so familiar to you, so I'm just going to reiterate. Finding time to do research, particularly when you're working in clinical practice, is really tricky. And it's the same for my colleagues. I work with people who are incredibly teaching intensive. They want to do research. They've got huge teaching workloads. How on earth do you make that balance? And these are just a few techniques that you'll already know, but time blocking. Actually actively block out time in your diary when you're going to do your research and stick to it. If you really want to do it, it will happen. There is sometimes a thought that research, imagine you're doing a publication or something, there's sometimes a thought that unless you have several days off to get on with it, or several days blocked out to do it, you can't do it. You have to be a bit flexible, and the Pomodoro technique can actually be really helpful, where you time yourself for 25 minutes to just do that thing, whatever it is, to progress with publication. And if you block yourself out 25 minutes every day and get on with it, you can keep your mind on the job, so you don't have to sort of refresh yourself every time, and you progress. And 25 minutes 5 times a week actually adds up to quite a lot of time. It sounds very simple. We've found it works really well in practice. With the 4 Ds, essentially think about whether you actually need to do that job, whether it needs to be done now. This is weird. If you apply it to emails, you either do it, delegate it to somebody else, defer it, put it into your diary to do another day, or just get rid of it. If you really don't need to do it, just get rid of it. It's okay to be flexible. You can change your mind about things. You know, you can start things and think, no, this really isn't going to work, and just let it go. And finally, know when good enough is good enough. So 20% of your time will result in 80% of the output, and after that you start to go on a downward trajectory. And sometimes, particularly I think as researchers, we tend to be perfectionists, and you have to accept that it's good enough. If you're doing a manuscript for publication, is it good enough to go out? Because you're going to have to change it anyway, almost inevitably. So decide good enough and press the button and off it goes. Same with grants, get it good enough that it can go, and that's still high quality. So use your time wisely. Don't think you have to have lots and lots of separate time. We are jugglers. And keep on writing, get your name known. And we've got a massive repertoire of things we do to avoid the task of writing, because it is hard. It can be a bit lonely, but just keep going. I'm not going to read those out to you, but I guess some of them will be quite familiar. But you can write anywhere. I've got a colleague who absolutely routinely writes 500 words a day of whatever, blogs, publications, grant applications, but every single day he churns out 500 words, and that his CV is now something like 79 pages, because he's very good at getting published. So, if you've got a train journey, don't waste it, write. And if you get something on paper, you can then play around with it. It just becomes so much easier. Do have some sort of action plan. Where do you want to be? If you think about why you're not getting on in research, think about what your personal barriers are, how you might overcome them, what you need to do. And then have a publication plan, a grant application plan. If you know where you're going, it makes life much easier. And don't be too hard on yourself, because juggling clinical work, teaching, research is tough, and you can't do everything excellently all the time. So don't be too hard on yourself, and learn to accept rejection, because that is part of being a researcher. Those are a couple of references. If you are interested in thinking about your barriers and facilitators to research, it's worth just having a look at those papers. I find them fascinating, use them quite a lot in terms of getting evidence into practice. So they're worth a thought.